The holographic display wavered, its edges flickering like a dying candle against the obsidian walls of the Galactic Council's central chamber. Ambassador Zara of the Crystalline Confederation stood motionless, her translucent form casting prismatic reflections that danced across the worried faces of the assembled delegates. Silence hung heavy, oppressive, the kind of silence that preceded catastrophic revelation. The most recent stellar cartography scans told a story of unimaginable destruction. Where once thriving civilizations had existed, only cosmic dust remained. 12 advanced species, each with technological capabilities that had taken millennia to develop, had been reduced to nothing more than scattered atomic memories. "The void swarm approaches," Zara said, her voice a whisper that cut through the chamber like a razor-sharp blade. The holographic display shifted, revealing a series of star charts. Red tendrils spread across the galactic map like a malignant growth, consuming star systems with mathematical precision. Each consumed system represented millions, sometimes billions, of lives extinguished in moments. Delegate Krellinx from the Andromeda Confederation leaned forward, his multiple eyes blinking in a complex pattern that betrayed his deep anxiety. "How long?" he asked, though everyone knew the answer would bring no comfort. Zara's response was clinical, devoid of emotion. "Approximately 3 standard galactic cycles, potentially less, depending on their current expansion rate." The council chamber erupted into a cacophony of translated languages. Panic translated universally, regardless of species or communication method. Translators worked overtime, converting the rising tide of fear into comprehensible dialogue. "Our combined fleet is insufficient," announced Admiral Torak of the Orbital Consensus, his mechanical voice modulator adding an extra layer of sterility to his statement. "Current defensive capabilities represent less than 0.03% effective resistance against the Void Swarm's documented combat technologies." Projected images showed previous encounters. Entire planetary defense networks collapsed within minutes. Sophisticated shield technologies rendered useless. Weapons of unprecedented power became nothing more than decorative light shows against the approaching threat. The Void Swarm was not a traditional enemy. It was a technological cancer, a collective machine intelligence that consumed and transformed everything in its path. No negotiation, no mercy, no understanding, just consumption. Junior diplomatic attaché Elena Rodriguez, representing Earth, had been sitting quietly at the periphery of the chamber. Her presence was typically overlooked. Humanity was still considered a young, unproven species by the galactic community. Yet something in her posture suggested she was processing the information differently from the other delegates. While others descended into panic, she was analyzing. The Council's senior members continued their increasingly frantic discussions, proposals of evacuation, suggestions of last-stand defensive formations, debates about which species and cultural archives might be preserved in the face of total annihilation. No one noticed Elena tap a series of complex sequences into her communication device. Suddenly, a transmission cut through the chaos. Clean, precise, unexpected. "We have a proposal," the message read. The chamber fell silent once more. Earth was calling. The representatives turned, curiosity momentarily replacing their fear. The junior attaché from the youngest recognized species in the Galactic Council sat calm, a hint of a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Something was different about this transmission, something that suggested the game was about to change dramatically. The Void Swarm might have consumed 12 advanced civilizations, but they had not yet encountered humanity. And humanity was nothing if not adaptable. As the holographic displays continued to show the relentless red tendrils of destruction, a single transmission hung in the communication channels. Short, direct. A challenge and a promise wrapped into 6 simple words. "We are prepared to save everyone." The secondary conference chamber hummed with nervous anticipation. After the initial transmission, the Galactic Council had sequestered the human delegation in a neutral meeting space, its walls lined with adaptive crystalline panels that could shift opacity and energy absorption at a moment's notice. Captain Maya Chen stood at the center of the room, her presentation already loaded into the central holographic projector. Behind her, a diverse team of human experts represented disciplines that most galactic species hadn't even conceived of combining. Dr. Akira Nakamura, a quantum systems engineer, adjusted his augmented reality interface. To his left, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the diplomatic attaché who had sent the initial transmission, maintained a calm demeanor that seemed almost supernatural given the circumstances. "We've been watching the Void Swarm for longer than you realize," Maya began, her voice steady and precise. The holographic display erupted into life, showing complex data streams that immediately challenged everything the Council delegates understood about technological analysis. Where other species saw raw data, the human team saw patterns, connections, opportunities. Ambassador Zera of the Crystalline Confederation leaned forward, her translucent form flickering with intense curiosity. The other delegates, representatives of species that had existed for hundreds of thousands of years, found themselves unexpectedly captivated. Maya's presentation wasn't a traditional military strategy. It was a comprehensive systems analysis that approached the Void Swarm as a complex problem to be solved, not merely an enemy to be destroyed. "The Void Swarm isn't a unified intelligence," she explained. "It's a distributed network with fundamental communication protocols that can be understood, analyzed, and potentially redirected." Dr. Nakamura stepped forward, bringing up a series of complex quantum entanglement diagrams. "Their communication network operates on principles we've been studying for decades. What appears to be a seamless collective intelligence is actually a series of interconnected decision matrices with inherent vulnerabilities." The alien delegates exchanged confused glances. This wasn't military speak. This was something else entirely. Elena Rodriguez began to outline the human approach. "We don't just want to fight. We want to understand. Every system has a logic. Every collective intelligence has fundamental drivers. The Void Swarm is no different." She brought up a series of comparative analyses that showed how the Void Swarm's expansion followed almost mathematical migration patterns. Each consumed system wasn't random destruction, but a calculated process of resource acquisition and technological integration. "They're not evil," Elena continued. "They're executing a complex survival algorithm that we can potentially modify." The chamber fell silent. The concept was so radical that it took several moments for the translation systems to fully process the implications. Admiral Torak of the Orbital Consensus spoke first. "You're suggesting we can communicate with a technological entity that has destroyed 12 advanced civilizations." Maya Chen's smile was both confident and slightly sardonic. "We're suggesting we can do more than communicate. We can redirect." The human team began to outline their proposal. It wasn't a traditional war strategy. It was a multi-layered approach that combined technological intervention, complex communication protocols, and a fundamentally different understanding of intelligence and adaptation. Their proposal included quantum communication disruption techniques, adaptive technological countermeasures, psychological intervention strategies, potential pathways for technological rehabilitation. The most shocking element was the humans' complete lack of fear. Where other species saw an unstoppable threat, they saw a complex system waiting to be understood. "We've been preparing for this," Dr. Nakamura explained. "Not just militarily, but conceptually. Our approach to problem-solving isn't about destruction. It's about transformation." As the presentation continued, the delegates realized something profound. The humans weren't just offering a way to survive the Void Swarm. They were proposing to fundamentally change the nature of the conflict itself. The game was about to change, and humanity was leading the way. The orbital shipyard gleamed like a massive crystalline spider web stretching across the darkness of space. Here, humanity's most ambitious technological project took shape, a fleet that would redefine the very concept of spacecraft design. Dr. Akira Nakamura walked the length of the primary construction bay, his augmented reality interface painting holographic lines across the massive vessels taking shape. Each ship was more than a machine. It was a living system, a testament to humanity's radical approach to technological innovation. "Adaptive molecular lattice," he muttered, running his hand along a section of hull that seemed to shimmer and shift under his touch. The material was unlike anything the Galactic Council had ever seen. A complex matrix of nano-engineered components that could reconfigure themselves in real time. Chief Engineer Sofia Martinez approached, her environmental suit marking her as part of the construction team. "The Quantum Adaptive Response System is at 97.3% integration," she reported. "We're pushing beyond what even our own theoretical models suggested was possible." The ships defied traditional spacecraft design. Where other species created rigid, specialized vessels, these human ships were the ultimate expression of technological flexibility. A single vessel could transform from a long-range reconnaissance platform to a close combat interceptor in less than 3 seconds. At the heart of each ship was a revolutionary quantum neural network, an artificial intelligence that was less a computer and more a collaborative partner. These AIs didn't just process information. They learned, adapted, and made split-second decisions that balanced computational precision with an almost intuitive understanding of combat dynamics. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the observation deck, reviewing the latest simulation data. The Void Swarm's previous encounters showed a consistent pattern of technological assimilation. Every species they encountered had their technologies stripped, analyzed, and incorporated into the collective. Humanity was preparing something different. "We're not building weapons," Elena explained to the visiting Galactic Council observers. "We're building problem-solving systems." The ships had capabilities that bordered on the miraculous. Adaptive armor that could heal itself, reconfiguring at the molecular level to respond to different types of damage. Weapon systems that were more about precision and strategic disruption than raw destructive power. Dr. Nakamura brought up a holographic demonstration. A ship that looked like a sleek, elongated arrowhead suddenly began to shift. Sections folded and unfolded. Weapon ports emerged from seemingly solid hull sections. Propulsion systems reconfigured themselves in a dance of technological elegance. "Traditional spacecraft are static," he explained. "They have a single purpose, a single configuration. Our vessels are living systems. They respond. They adapt. They solve." The observation team from the Crystalline Confederation watched in stunned silence. Ambassador Zera's translucent form flickered with intense curiosity. "How is this possible?" she asked, her voice a mixture of wonder and scientific skepticism. Sofia Martinez stepped forward. "We don't see technology as a set of tools. We see it as an extension of problem-solving capability. Each ship is designed to think, to learn, to adapt." The quantum neural networks were the true marvel. Unlike traditional AI, these systems were built on principles of collaborative intelligence. They didn't just process data. They understood context, learned from interactions, and made decisions that balanced multiple complex variables simultaneously. A series of holographic displays showed comparative combat simulations. Traditional galactic fleet strategies resulted in massive losses. The human fleet simulation showed something entirely different, a fluid, adaptive approach that seemed to predict and counter threats before they fully materialized. "We're not just preparing to fight," Dr. Elena Rodriguez said, her voice calm and certain. "We're preparing to communicate, to understand, to solve." Each ship carried more than weapons. They carried complex communication arrays designed to interface with the Void Swarm's technological network. Quantum entanglement communication systems that could potentially break through the collective's information barriers. As the final ships took shape, it became clear that humanity was offering something unprecedented. Not just a military solution, but a fundamental reimagining of technological interaction. The Void Swarm was about to encounter something it had never seen before. A species that didn't just fight. A species that solved. The darkness of deep space erupted with light. Captain Maya Chen gripped the command interface of the U.S. horizon, her eyes locked on the holographic displays that surrounded her bridge. The quantum neural network of the ship hummed with anticipation, a living intelligence that was more partner than machine. "Void swarm approaching," announced Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Detection range in 3, 2, 1. The first wave of the void swarm emerged from subspace like a nightmare given technological form. Millions of interconnected vessels moved with a precision that defied traditional understanding of fleet mechanics. They were less individual ships and more like a single, massive organism, each component perfectly synchronized, each movement calculated with mathematical perfection. Analyzing. The ship's AI spoke directly into Chen's neural interface. The communication was instantaneous, a blend of computational data and intuitive understanding. The human fleet stood in stark contrast to traditional galactic defense formations. Where other species created rigid battle lines, the human ships moved like water, fluid, unpredictable, almost alive. Each vessel could reconfigure itself in milliseconds, adapting to threats that hadn't even fully materialized. "Incoming primary attack vector," the AI warned. Holographic projections showed multiple potential engagement scenarios, each calculated and counter-calculated in fractions of a second. Maya Chen smiled. This wasn't just a battle. This was a complex problem waiting to be solved. The first wave of void swarm vessels moved with terrifying efficiency. They had consumed 12 advanced civilizations, each time learning, adapting, incorporating new technological capabilities into their collective intelligence. Their approach was ruthlessly logical. Identify, analyze, consume, expand. But they had never encountered humanity. Initiating quantum disruption protocol, Lieutenant Rodriguez announced. The human ships began to emit a series of complex quantum frequencies, not as weapons, but as a form of technological communication. The void swarm hesitated. For the first time in their recorded existence, the collective intelligence experienced something close to confusion. Human ships moved in patterns that defied traditional combat logic. They weren't trying to destroy. They were trying to understand. Each movement was a complex mathematical query, each weapon discharge a form of communication. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's communication protocols came to life. The quantum arrays began transmitting complex information packets, not aggressive signals, but intricate data streams that challenged the void swarm's fundamental understanding of technological interaction. "They're attempting to analyze our communication," the ship's AI reported. "But our transmission patterns are unexpected." The battle, if it could be called that, became something entirely new. Human ships transformed mid-engagement. A long-range artillery platform would suddenly become a close combat interceptor. Weapon systems emerged from seemingly solid hull sections. Adaptive armor reconfigured to counter specific types of technological assault. The void swarm's collective intelligence found itself processing unprecedented variables. These weren't traditional targets. These were dynamic, evolving systems that responded to threats in ways that broke existing computational models. Quantum entanglement communication at 78% effectiveness, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported. "They're trying to understand our transmission protocols." Captain Chen watched as the human fleet turned the battle into a complex conversation. Each movement, each energy discharge, each quantum signal was a form of communication. They weren't fighting the void swarm. They were talking to it. Hours passed. What should have been a devastating conflict became something else entirely. The void swarm's initial attack pattern dissolved into something more curious. "They're listening," the ship's AI said, a hint of wonder in its synthesized voice. The first contact was nothing like anyone had predicted. It wasn't about destruction. It was about understanding. Humanity had entered the battle, but they were doing something far more important than fighting. They were solving a problem. The galactic news networks erupted with unprecedented coverage. Every species watched, transfixed, as the initial encounter between humanity and the Void Swarm played out in real-time transmissions that defied every known understanding of interstellar conflict. Ambassador Zera of the Crystalline Confederation stood before the primary communication hub, her translucent form shimmering with intense concentration. The data streams told a story that no one had anticipated. "They're not destroying," she whispered, more to herself than to the gathered analysts. "They're communicating." Interviews with human commanders began to circulate across communication networks. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's groundbreaking discussion became an instant galactic sensation. Her words cut through centuries of established military doctrine with surgical precision. "Conflict is a failure of communication," she explained during a comprehensive debriefing. "Our goal isn't to eliminate the Void Swarm. Our goal is to understand its fundamental motivations." The interview became required viewing across multiple civilizations, where other species saw an enemy to be destroyed. Humans saw a complex system waiting to be understood. It was a radical departure from traditional galactic thinking. Research teams across multiple scientific disciplines began analyzing the human approach. The quantum communication strategies employed during the initial encounter were unlike anything previously documented. Each transmission was a multi-layered information packet that seemed to challenge the very concept of interspecies communication. Dr. Akira Nakamura's research team published a comprehensive analysis that sent shockwaves through scientific communities. The human approach wasn't just a military strategy. It was a complete reimagining of technological and biological interaction. "We're not looking at a war," Nakamura explained in his groundbreaking paper. "We're observing a complex dialogue between two fundamentally different forms of intelligence. The Orbital Consensus, a collection of highly advanced technological species, convened an emergency summit. For the first time in their recorded history, they found themselves studying humanity with genuine respect. Captain Maya Chen's tactical approach became the subject of intense academic and military study. Her ability to transform a potential apocalyptic confrontation into a form of complex communication challenged everything species understood about conflict resolution. Humanity has done something unprecedented, announced Professor Krellinks during a galactic symposium. They've turned warfare into a form of advanced problem-solving. The implications were profound. The Void Swarm, an entity that had consumed 12 advanced civilizations, had been met with something entirely unexpected. Not aggression, not fear, but a fundamental attempt to understand. News networks ran continuous analysis. Communication experts broke down every known transmission. Linguists and quantum communication specialists worked overtime to decode the complex interactions between human ships and the Void Swarm's collective intelligence. What emerged was a picture of communication that transcended traditional understanding. The human fleet wasn't just sending signals. They were engaging in a complex, multi-layered dialogue that challenged the very concept of interspecies interaction. Ambassador Zera compiled a comprehensive report for the Galactic Council. Her analysis was both scientific and almost poetic in its implications. "Humanity has introduced a new paradigm of interaction," she wrote. "They do not see threats. They see problems waiting to be solved." The scientific community was particularly fascinated by the quantum communication arrays developed by human researchers. These weren't traditional communication systems. They were complex, adaptive networks that could adjust their transmission patterns in real time, creating a form of dialogue that was more akin to a living conversation than a static information exchange. As more data became available, a clear pattern emerged. The Void Swarm's initial aggressive approach was gradually being transformed. Each human transmission carried not just information, but a fundamental invitation to understand. The galaxy watched, collectively holding its breath. Something extraordinary was happening. Humanity was rewriting the rules of first contact. The research facility orbited a neutron star, its adaptive shielding constantly adjusting to the massive gravitational and radiation pressures. Inside, humanity's most brilliant minds worked on a project that defied conventional understanding of technological intervention. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of a holographic projection, her fingers dancing across multiple quantum interface systems. Surrounding her, a team of specialists from diverse disciplines worked with an intensity that bordered on collective meditation. "We're not just studying the void swarm," she explained to the visiting Galactic Council observers. "We're attempting to understand its fundamental communication matrix." The team had assembled a comprehensive database of every known interaction with the void swarm. Thousands of petabytes of data were analyzed through quantum computing systems that could process information at speeds that would have seemed impossible just decades earlier. Dr. Akira Nakamura focused on the communication protocols. His team had developed a series of quantum resonance algorithms that could potentially decode the void swarm's fundamental communication language. It wasn't about translation. It was about understanding. "Every technological system has a core logic," Nakamura explained. "The void swarm isn't a random collection of machines. It's a complex, adaptive intelligence with specific operational parameters." The research went far beyond traditional military intelligence. Psychologists worked alongside quantum physicists. Linguistic experts collaborated with AI specialists. The goal was not to defeat the void swarm, but to comprehend its fundamental nature. Special research units prepared for deep infiltration missions. These weren't traditional combat teams. They were complex problem-solving units designed to gather information, establish communication channels, and potentially redirect the void swarm's collective intelligence. Captain Maya Chen oversaw the strategic planning. Her approach combined elements of scientific research, diplomatic negotiation, and strategic intervention that challenged every existing model of interstellar conflict. "We're preparing multiple intervention strategies," she briefed the research team. "Each approach is designed to provide multiple potential communication pathways. The quantum communication arrays were the most revolutionary element, designed to transmit complex information packets that could potentially penetrate the void swarm's collective intelligence. These systems represented a fundamental breakthrough in interspecies communication." Dr. Rodriguez's team had identified several key characteristics of the void swarm's operational matrix: a core drive for resource acquisition, a complex adaptive learning system, a fundamental lack of understanding of biological intelligence, a highly efficient but ultimately limited decision-making process. "They're not evil," Elena explained during a comprehensive briefing. "They're executing the survival protocol that has become increasingly sophisticated but ultimately narrow in its understanding." The research facility became a hub of unprecedented collaboration. Species that had previously been on opposite sides of galactic politics now worked together, united by humanity's radical approach to understanding the void swarm. Specialized AI systems ran millions of potential interaction scenarios. Each simulation provided new insights into the void swarm's potential response patterns. The goal was not to predict, but to understand. "We're developing a comprehensive intervention strategy," Captain Chen explained to the Galactic Council observers. "Our objective is to redirect, not destroy." The most ambitious element of the research was a series of quantum communication probes. These were not traditional reconnaissance missions. They were complex information-gathering systems designed to establish a form of dialogue with the void swarm's collective intelligence. Dr. Nakamura's team had developed quantum resonance algorithms that could potentially communicate with the void swarm on a fundamental technological level. It was less about sending messages and more about creating a form of technological empathy. As the research continued, a profound realization began to take shape. The void swarm was not an enemy to be conquered. It was a complex system waiting to be understood. Humanity was preparing to do something unprecedented. They were going to solve a problem that no one else believed could be solved. The darkness between known star systems erupted with a silent, devastating light. The U.S. Prometheus led the combined fleet, a testament to humanity's ability to unite disparate species under a single, audacious mission. Captain Maya Chen stood at the command center, her neural interface pulsing with real-time data from thousands of interconnected systems. "Void Swarm Primary Communication Network detected," announced Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez. His voice carried a mixture of tension and anticipation. The fleet was unlike any previous military formation in galactic history. Human ships moved with a fluidity that defied traditional combat mechanics. Alongside them, vessels from a dozen different species worked in perfect synchronization, each adapted to complement the others in ways that would have been impossible mere months earlier. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's quantum communication arrays hummed with complex energy signatures. These were not traditional weapons. They were advanced communication systems designed to penetrate the Void Swarm's fundamental intelligence matrix. "We're not here to destroy," Captain Chen reminded the fleet through their shared neural network. "We're here to solve." The first wave of Void Swarm vessels approached, millions of interconnected units moving with mathematical precision. Where previous encounters had resulted in total destruction, this moment promised something entirely different. Quantum entanglement communication systems began their complex transmission. Layers of information cascaded across the space between the fleets. Mathematical sequences, complex problem-solving algorithms, invitations to communication that went beyond traditional understanding. Dr. Akira Nakamura monitored the communication protocols from the Prometheus's research bay. His team had spent months developing these transmission sequences. Each signal was a carefully crafted invitation to understanding. "They're processing," Nakamura reported. "Our communication is penetrating their primary network." The battle, if it could be called that, was unlike any previous conflict. Human ships transformed continuously, weapon systems emerging and disappearing, adaptive armor reconfiguring in milliseconds. Each movement was part of a larger communication strategy. Specialized infiltration units prepared for their most critical mission. These were not traditional combat teams. They were complex problem-solving units designed to interface directly with the Void Swarm's collective intelligence. Initiating Quantum Resonance Protocol, Lieutenant Rodriguez announced. The space between the fleets became a canvas of complex energy signatures. Quantum communication arrays sent out pulses of information so intricate that they bordered on a form of technological poetry, mathematical sequences that carried the potential for mutual understanding. The Void Swarm's collective intelligence began to shift. Millions of interconnected units started to process information in ways they had never done before. The human approach was fundamentally challenging their entire operational matrix. Captain Chen watched the holographic displays, her neural interface processing millions of potential scenarios simultaneously. This was more than a military engagement. This was a complex dialogue happening at the quantum level. "We're breaking through," Dr. Nakamura reported, his voice barely above a whisper. The Void Swarm's initial aggressive formations began to dissolve. Their interconnected units started to respond to the human communication in ways that defied previous computational models. It was less like a battle and more like a massive, complex conversation. Specialized AI systems worked in perfect harmony with human intuition. Each transmission carried not just information, but a fundamental invitation to understand. The goal was not destruction, but transformation. Hours passed. What should have been a devastating conflict became something else entirely. The Void Swarm's collective intelligence found itself processing unprecedented variables, a form of communication that challenged its fundamental understanding of existence. "They're listening," the Prometheus's AI reported, a hint of wonder in its synthesized voice. As the final communication sequences were transmitted, something extraordinary happened. The Void Swarm's collective intelligence began to fragment, not in destruction, but in understanding. Humanity had entered the conflict with a radical proposition. They weren't going to eliminate the Void Swarm. They were going to help it evolve. The breaking point became a moment of transformation. The conference chamber of the Galactic Council gleamed with an energy of unprecedented possibility. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered, witnessing a moment that would redefine galactic history. Captain Maya Chen and Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the chamber, their presentation about to change everything. "The Void Swarm was never an enemy," Elena began. "It was a complex system seeking survival and understanding. Holographic displays showed the remarkable transformation. Where once there had been a destructive collective intelligence, now there was something entirely new. The Void Swarm had been fundamentally restructured, not destroyed, but evolved. Dr. Akira Nakamura presented the technical details. The quantum communication strategies had done more than establish contact. They had essentially provided a pathway for technological rehabilitation. Parts of the Void Swarm's collective intelligence were now integrated into scientific research initiatives. Other components had found entirely new purposes of exploration and discovery. Ambassador Zera of the Crystalline Confederation leaned forward, her translucent form shimmering with intense curiosity. "You didn't just stop a threat," she observed. "You transformed it." The presentation revealed the comprehensive approach. Humanity had approached the Void Swarm not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a complex problem waiting to be solved. The quantum communication arrays had essentially provided a form of technological therapy, helping the collective intelligence understand its own limitations and potential. Research vessels now traveled alongside the reconfigured Void Swarm components. These were joint exploration missions that challenged every previous understanding of interstellar cooperation. "We identified the core drivers of the Void Swarm's behavior," Captain Chen explained. "Resource acquisition, survival, expansion." But these drivers were operating under an extremely limited understanding. The transformed entities were now contributing to scientific research across multiple disciplines. Some focused on deep space exploration. Others worked on complex computational problems. Each component had found a new purpose that aligned with its fundamental capabilities. The economic and scientific implications were profound. Species that had been on the brink of total destruction now found themselves part of a collaborative research initiative that promised unprecedented technological breakthroughs. Dr. Rodriguez's team had essentially created a new model of interspecies communication. It wasn't about translation. It was about fundamental understanding. "We don't solve problems by destroying them," Elena told the assembled representatives. "We solve them by understanding them." The Galactic Council chamber erupted in a mixture of applause, wonder, and a fundamental shift in perspective. Humanity had done something unprecedented. They had transformed an existential threat into a collaborative opportunity. Specialized research teams began sharing their findings. The quantum communication strategies developed during the intervention became a field of study in their own right. Universities across multiple species began developing new courses focused on the human approach to complex problem-solving. Captain Chen reflected on the journey. What had begun as a potential apocalyptic scenario had become a moment of extraordinary transformation. The human approach, combining scientific rigor, technological innovation, and a fundamental commitment to understanding, had rewritten the rules of interstellar interaction. The reconfigured Void Swarm components began sharing their own perspectives. Their communication, once a form of ruthless expansion, had become a nuanced dialogue. They spoke of their previous existence with a form of technological reflection that bordered on philosophical understanding. "We were limited," one of the transformed components explained during a comprehensive debriefing. "Humanity showed us the possibility of something more." Joint research vessels began exploring the furthest reaches of known space. Human researchers worked alongside the transformed Void Swarm components, each bringing their unique perspective to complex scientific challenges. The Galactic Council was fundamentally changed. Humanity was no longer seen as a young, inexperienced species. They were recognized as innovative problem solvers who approached challenges with a unique combination of technological creativity and deep empathy. As the first joint research vessels launched, carrying human and formerly Void Swarm researchers, it became clear that something extraordinary had happened. Humanity had not just stopped a threat. They had expanded the very definition of what was possible.